O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Oh, hey, it's the Hunting Collective. Another episode number 67 to be precise. We're getting along in June. I'm excited about that because it means we're closer to September. Feels like everybody likes to talk about thinking about September in June. I like June, though. It's pretty cool. On today's show, we've got Miles Nolte, the director of fishing. We're talking about all things Lamalerans. Lamalerans is a tribe of subsistence whale hunters on a small island in Indonesia. So you're going to learn about those guys. And then we're interviewing an author of the book, The Last Whalers, Doug Bock Clark. And we're going to dive into his 3 years he spent with the Lamalerans. It's a real interesting subject, so please stick around for that. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about federal premium ammunition. And in our discussions of federal premium prior, we've been talking about the TSS turkey load, how many turkeys we killed. But it's starting to be time to think about get your rifle out, start picking your calibers, start making your selections for the upcoming hunting season. And I just did that for bears. And if you look at what caliber to choose for bears, you can go to federalpremium.com and they have an ammo recommendation section, which is pretty damn cool. You click around, you can pick your species, you can pick the load you want to use, and it'll tell you everything you want to do. So it starts with selecting your activity, whether you're target shooting, self-defense, or hunting, and then it takes you through the steps to choose exactly the caliber necessary to kill the thing you're after. It's pretty cool. We've had a lot of people write in and ask those questions. How do I choose the right caliber? Well, Federal Premium offers a pretty cool thing on their website to get you exactly where you need to be, whether it's antelope, whether it's bison, whether it's mountain goat, mountain lion. They even have a thing in here for elephants and Cape buffalo. It's funny that they have elephant right next to rabbit in the ammo selection category on the website. So go there, federalpremium.com, visit them, check out their ammo recommendations. You're going to like it. And now, let's get to the show. Let's do it.
I guess I grew up on an older road. A pedal to the metal, always did what I was told. Until I found out that my brand new clothes came secondhand from the rich kids next door. When I grew up fast, I guess I grew up mean. There's 1,000 things inside my head I wish I ain't seen. And now I just wander through a real bad dream, or feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. But thank you, Jack Daniels, oh, number 7.
Oh, hey, everybody. And welcome to the Hunting Collective. You're going to be listening to this on 6/25/19. We're here in the brand new, this is like brand spickety new, as Steve Rinella would say. People have been charging that I'm starting to talk like him, but I can't help it. It's so very contagious, his voice. Anyway, brand spickety new Meat Eater podcast studio. It's got all kinds of new microphones and new pictures and a new engineer named Phil.
How's it going?
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Phil.
Hello.
And we also have Miles Nolte.
Hi, everybody.
Director of fishing here.
I have a confession to make. I also have found myself speaking like Steve lately. We did a hot tip-off the other day, and I used the word fella.
Yeah.
That's not in my normal lexicon at all. And as it came out of my mouth, I was thinking, I definitely just absorbed like some of Steve Rinella's zeitgeist right there.
Let's take a quick moment to discuss that, because I feel like there's something about the way that he approaches things that gets in your damn brain.
Yeah.
Like, what is it?
I can say this, and we may get called out on this, but it is not like an intentional attempt to replicate his cadence of speech.
No.
It really isn't. It infiltrates your brain in ways that it's like insidious.
Some people, like Colonel Tom Kelly, I had him on the podcast some weeks ago, and I said that he literally narrates. Now that I know what his voice sounds like, I know that he's been narrating through his books my turkey hunting for a long time. Like a turkey be coming in, I'll be thinking about Tom Kelly and the narrating. So I think for a lot of people, they wake up and their inner monologue sounds like Steve Rinella.
Yeah, I thankfully that's not happening yet. I don't wake up in the morning like embodying Steve Rinella, but when I'm working with him and I'm talking with him and we have like there's a particular like fast-paced way of speaking, and you just sort of, when you're in a conversation with him, you better keep up or he's going to move on.
He walks away.
Yeah, literally. That's not.
And a lot of people on this podcast loved when we did the Game of Thrones bit where I was explaining Game of Thrones to him, and I will give you a little bit of behind the scenes. He literally, if you go back and listen, he leaves his portion ends abruptly because he literally stood up, took the headphones off, and just walked out. I gotta go. And he walked.
So maybe that is the reason why you have to like keep up with Steve in terms of the pace that you speak, at which you speak rather, or the conversation just ends.
He'll leave you.
Yeah, you're done.
He'll leave you. What do you think about that, Phil?
Well, I haven't been here long enough to kind of experience this, but I'm looking forward to boring Steve in the near future, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because I can talk about Game of Thrones as well. Can't talk as well about hunting.
So you're going to fit in here.
Exactly.
The Hunting Collective is a safe space where you don't have to live up to Steve's expectations.
I'm at home then. There we go.
You're going to be here. Well, welcome to Meat Eater. I'm going to make sure Phil gets in a lot of these shows because
this could be a mistake. This is where it ends for you.
This could be it.
Yeah.
Oh, he's heard that so many times before in his career.
Okay.
You have no idea.
I'm the barnacle on the hunting industry. I'm a barnacle.
This is where it ends.
Look at this. Watch this transition. Speaking of barnacles.
Yes.
You like that?
I do.
Speaking of barnacles, we're going to talk about whales. Specifically, the very last subsistence whale hunting culture. Is it whale hunting? Because they're not fishing for the whales.
No, it's definitely hunting. And I'm going to say, if we have time, I want to go back to barnacles, but continue with the whales.
Please. We'll end on barnacles.
I have quite a bit to say.
And I wanted to start the conversation of this. Well, in the interview portion of the show, you're going to hear a guy named Doug Bock Clark. And Doug is a very earnest man who, we both fancy ourselves journalists. I have a journalism degree, things of that nature. So I say that. But here's a man who's won many awards and has spent years and months working on one piece of journalism, which we can't here at a digital media company even understand.
No, the level of dedication to embed with a culture for 3 years to work on a singular project, I mean, that is incredibly laudable, and we don't have enough of that long-form journalism going on at all.
So Doug, I went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and sat in Doug's house, and we talked about his book, The Last Whalers. So you'll hear that in some minutes here. But what I wanted to... It's not that you need to know who the Lamalerans are, which is the tribe and the culture that is based off a small island in Indonesia. It's not that you really need to know much about them, but to understand kind of the questions that they have. And their questions, we all have asked ourselves this, but I just wrote down that they have these main questions. It goes in Doug's book when you read about the Lamalerans and you understand kind of where they are with the struggle between modernity and their culture and worshiping their ancestors, which they do. They ask themselves these questions. Who are we? Who were we? Who are we now, and who will we become? And they ask themselves these questions in so many tangible ways that we can't really relate to. They worship, in their culture, they worship their ancestors. Their ancestors are, the souls of their ancestors inform what they do on a daily basis. Also in their culture, they are struggling now with the things that modernity brings. The younger generations are bringing in cell phones to their culture. They're bringing in TV and pop culture and different things from around the world. So they're struggling with who are we right now? And then generationally, how can we hang on to this thing that we have? Which you'll hear Doug talk about, the culture that they have with subsistence whale hunting and living off that resource. And so those three questions are part of their daily lives in a way that struck me as pretty profound.
Do you find yourself now engaging in those questions for yourself and your own family as a result of that?
Not in such a tangible way that they do, because we don't have the direct impacts to our lives the way that they do. They're seeing the erosion of their lifestyle. They're seeing the people they used to be, changed in such a stark way. We see little changes, right? Like little.
I don't know if I'm going to agree with you on that.
Hit me.
So this I think relates to, and certainly maybe it's not in as dramatic a fashion as actually losing a subsistence whaling culture, but how often do we talk about the erosion of outdoor sporting culture and the direct threat that poses to our identities, to our livelihoods, to the ways that we want to envision our own culture and society? This is a constant refrain that we are bringing up through the media that we create and through the people that we talk to. So I don't know that I agree with you to say that this isn't a significant piece of what we think and talk about.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I just think it's not as stark. I mean, for them, it's like, can we still row out in a small boat and spear a 40-ton whale and drag it back and chop it up with machetes? Can we still do that? For us, it's a little more intricate than that. But the main ideas stand. Who are we? Like, as a modern hunter, who are we? Who are we now? Who do we want to be? Who were we? All those things are intertwined in everything we do.
Absolutely. And modern hunting and fishing is so drastically divorced from true subsistence culture.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if we're looking at it in that kind of timeline,
of course.
Were we? We were once desperately needing to harvest game and fish to survive, to feed our families. Where are we now? Well, we feel some sort of connection to that. It enriches our livelihood and our identity and our existence in some not very tangible but important way. Where are we going? We want to hold on to the ability to not have to do this, but be able to do it.
Yeah.
The stakes are different.
Yeah, and you'll hear Doug talk about in the interview that there's these things that they have. In fact, anthropologists have studied their culture and said this is one of the most cooperative cultures, because they have a group called the Lamafa, which are the top whalers. They stand at the back of the boat. These are the top hunters in the culture, right? So they're exalted and they hold a high status. They have to share the meat. They only kill so many whales. That meat has to be distributed over the 1,500 or so people that live in the inlet there where they live. And so they have to think of sharing. There isn't the concept of being selfish, of taking that for your own. You're literally serving the whole community. And so you find that through indigenous hunting cultures and things through time.
Oh yeah. I would say that's another piece that has eroded from, if we're again looking at it in those 3-point touch points from where we were to where we are to where we're going. That's not at all part of our contemporary hunting culture. I mean, sure, we share, like, I might give a buddy some meat. I might come back and be like, hey man, I got a whole lot of mule deer. Do you want some? But that's not the same as being beholden to a community that's not just hoping that you'll share something around, but needing you to be successful in your hunt in order to have your whole community survive.
Yeah.
That's a different level.
And to be fair, Doug's not the only person to have covered the Lamalerans.
No.
Many folks have written about them. Outside Magazine, I mean, it's even some more endemic to what we do.
Yeah.
Have written about them. And I think it's those curiosities that we have, that we hold innately, that have driven that coverage. It's like, here's this example of, we've gone over and Doug mentions this in the interview, we've gone over like a cultural extinction. These hunter-gatherer cultures are slowly dying over time. And the numbers are, you'll hear them later, but the numbers are pretty astounding. And we're losing this sense of ourselves. But
I'm gonna flip that a little bit and say that's a privileged position for us to sit in, right?
Yes.
To be able to say like, oh, it's so sad that these hunter-gathering cultures are going away, right? But if I'm the youth of that culture sitting there going, here, my options are to either be on this boat rowing for my life, probably going to get mangled and potentially killed by this whale, or I could have a cell phone and an office job.
Yeah. It's good to have options.
Like, how arrogant is it of us to sit where we're sitting right now and say, like, it's really sad that you guys are losing your culture. Yeah. If I'm now, I'm like, screw you, man.
Oh, there's a lot of people, you read the book, there's a lot of characters in Doug's book that kind of struggle with this. Some of them choose, some of them completely leave their children, their family. They go and live in town, and they leave it. But the funny thing about the Lamalerans is that they've been able to, through all kinds of legal, but not only just battles within their wn culture and sense of self, but legal battles, animal rights groups wanting to come in and stop what they do. But they've been able to hang on to that, which must mean it has some value to them, or it has some great value to them generationally, that even though they'll have these battles and have to make a choice we'll never have to really make. We make the choice to hunt,
right,
rather than the reverse, or having to have like a 1 versus 1 there. We could certainly stop hunting and fishing tomorrow and be just fine, as many folks are. The way their culture is, they can't.
Well, they can, but doing so requires a sea change in the way their culture operates.
Yes.
And a loss of that communal sense, and a loss of those traditional hierarchies and roles, and a loss of everything that they understand as being themselves, as holding them up as unique. Yeah. But again, maintaining that requires significant sacrifice, and it's hard. I think it's not necessarily. This is sort of a weird imperialism that we still do, of going into native cultures and being like, what you should do is keep it like it is.
Yeah.
You don't be like us. I know this looks comfortable and great because I've never had to really work a day in my life like you
Cell
have.
phones give you cancer.
It's really tough. Have you seen how fat we are? Do you really want to be that fat?
Yeah, I think once you get past, if you start to get into this, and it's really interesting to me for these reasons, but also people will really find that a group of people that drag bull sharks by their tail onto the beach and beat them with clubs.
And tiger sharks.
Yeah. Which is even more shocking. And sperm whale is one of the largest things on the earth.
Predators.
Largest predator on the earth.
Yeah.
40 tons. And they're going in small wooden ships and spearing them, and sometimes spending days and days chasing these whales. And so once you get past, like, that's just an amazing of itself that they're able to do that physically and mentally, and with the skill that they have. Once you get past that, then you start to really get into this sense of our relationship. Like, we're them, but we're also not them.
Yeah. I mean, we think that we've really done something when, we hike 10 miles into the backcountry and kill an elk and carry it all out. Like, that's
with Italian leather boots.
Yeah, we hold that. I was like, man, that dude's badass.
Yeah.
He took that whole elk out by himself. Do you see that?
No shit.
Wow. Like, that's what we hold up as the gold standard of badass hunter, and it doesn't even compare.
Not to this. When you think about the Lamalerans, you kind of just read about the concepts of the book. What questions did you have? Like, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I need to admit something to the audience right now. I have not read the book.
No.
I didn't do my homework.
I only listened to the audiobook.
Who did the recording on that? Who did the VO?
I don't know.
Were they good?
Not as good as you would have been.
No way.
Look at that. Listen to that. It's close. Like velvet. Deep. And these new mics that Phil got.
These new mics make us sound even better.
Phil, I mean, you've listened to a lot of people talking to mics. Listen to this voice right here. Give him something real smooth there, Miles.
This voice right here is straight velvet. Just for you, Phil. This is all for you.
I quit. It's not getting any better. I'm done.
That's like a 10 out of 10, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
That's pretty good. I like it.
Barry White ain't got shit on me. in terms of your question about the book, I mean, honestly, the first thing I thought of when I read it was a different book that I had read called The Sex Lives of Cannibals, which is kind of similar, but different island, different culture, different deal. What I was hungry for was, and this may be super stereotypical male of me, but I wanted to hear the details of like those harpooner guys. What's their class called?
Lamafa?
The Lamafa. And I wanted to understand, one, the specifics of what they do, and two, how they sort of fit into the broader hierarchical structure of the culture, and three, how one gets to be in the Lamafa.
Yeah, I mean, there's a character in the book. You follow kind of his family and his father, and then he becomes, at the end of the thing, becomes a Lamafa, and he has this. He probably embodies as much as anything the choice that these generational folks have to make. Like, do I want to stick with this? Do I want to be a whale hunter? Do I be one of the most exalted whale hunters in this culture, or do I want to hike over the mountain, go down into the valley, get on a boat, go across to town, and work at a Samsung shop or something? So you see those things, but his journey, I won't spoil it because Doug talks about it a good bit in our interview, but his journey to become a Lamafa kind of like typifies what this culture is, what they mean to each other, what they might mean to us. And that's what this book does a great job of. It takes some individual stories and helps to kind of weave those together to give you an understanding of the bigger picture within the culture. So it's worth your time. In fact, I told Doug I listened to the audiobook and then read the book and then re-listened to the audiobook because I thought it just struck me those questions we started with, but just also, like, say, the details of how do you do this?
Yeah,
I can't. I don't understand. And so you'll get in there, you know, guys spearing whales and being drugged under the water, guys tracking a whale that's wounded and being stuck out to sea for days and days and days and thinking they were going to die, and you know, they believe that their boats have souls, that their spears have souls. They believe that each good or bad thing that happens to them while hunting is informed by their ancestors. They must have done something to, what we would say, piss off the ancestors,
right?
In their hunting. So even those small parts of their storyline are interesting to me.
But, and I'm, again, didn't do the homework, so I don't know. I'm making this up, but I would guess that that folks like the central character John, right,
mm-hmm.
who are among the crop of young men who have at least a hope of making their version of the NFL.
Yes.
Right? Like he is a top prospect that's being courted. I can see how he would be truly at a point of friction of deciding which way he wanted to go. Am I going to stick around here and potentially be the top person within this culture,
mm-hmm.
or am I going to go to lead a different life where I may not have to work so hard, but I certainly won't get as much recognition? But what about the kid that's coming up in that culture that has no hope of ever being the killer whaler? Like, what about that kid who's like the bench warmer? If I'm that kid, you're damn right I'm going to Samsung. Right? Because I would guess that that's part of what's eroding that culture, is that the ones who are at the bottom of the pecking order and who are dependent don't have a choice anymore. Have a choice now where they didn't have a choice before. They can go and move to Jakarta. And I would guess those are the folks who are out.
And there's been a lot of that, and a lot of that erosion in their culture. But then there's been a shocking level of fight for their traditions, you know. And so that it just, again, there's this push-pull of there's a lot of things that modernity could do to make our lives better, but we feel, at least the core of their culture, feels so strongly about its benefits that they're willing to fight for it, and they've fought publicly for it. So that's interesting. That's I think tells a lot about this book. I think the book and the subject matter is all about a struggle with modernity. I mean, it really, in this time, if you like say remove the more tangible activities and how amazing they are,
right?
It's
the
about
feats
that
of strength,
the feats
if you
of.
will.
I mean, think of pulling a tiger shark by the tail and whacking in the head with a club.
Have you ever seen a tiger shark in person?
No,
I have.
not that I can think of.
And I can think of very few things more fearsome than being in the water and seeing a tiger shark.
Yeah.
The last thing I would ever do is be like, you know, it's a good idea. I'm going to see about pulling that tail, see what I can do. Like, I cannot imagine a reality in which that would happen in my brain.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about the modernity deal is like they made all these bets with themselves. Like, well, onboard motors, we'll put those on like just the rescue boats, but not the hunting boats.
Interesting.
And so I think maybe what they've done well in the core of their culture is to kind of give a little bit to modernity, enough to give a little bit of room for the new generations to feel connected there.
But, and I'm sure the book deals with this, but is that a slippery slope?
Oh yeah.
I mean, by putting that first motor on the rescue boat, are you inevitably down the road going to have one on the chase boat?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, probably. And so it's a creep, right?
Yeah.
It's a societal creep. But I think again, I'm just assuming a lot of folks haven't read it. I think the book came out like early this year in January. I'm assuming a lot of folks haven't read it. Go pick it up and give it a read. And I was also thinking what we should address here, a couple of emails, reader emails. We have thc@themeateater.com. And you guys have been writing in enough that I can't really keep up with what's going on. So I figured we should probably address some things.
You got some things to talk about? Are we off of whales, or is this connected to whales?
It's going to be off of whales.
Okay.
Do we need to, Phil, do you want to wrap us up on whales?
Not particularly, no.
Thanks, Phil.
You know what? I'm gonna bookend you. I got you here, buddy. Because we got into whales from barnacles.
Barnacles.
I'm gonna come out of whales with barnacles.
Forget about barnacles. I'm
gonna help you with this.
Okay.
So,
thanks.
Something that everyone should another book I think people should read. Darwin, same guy, Theory of Evolution, wrote an entire book on barnacles and the fascinating methods that barnacles have of surviving and reproducing. Interesting part about that book is he was halfway through the Theory of Evolution, and he took like 3 years to write a book on barnacles before finishing the Theory of Evolution.
What's that say about Darwin?
That he was terrified of what was going to happen as soon as he released his Theory of Evolution into a theocratic society. He was
barnacles.
Like, you know what's not going to piss anybody off at all? Barnacle sex. I'm going to write about that.
Let's take a 3-year barnacle sex break.
Exactly. And for all of you out there who are total science nerds, the Darwin tome on barnacle sex, Phil, this is for you too. Fascinating.
And the question that's in my mind right now is, what's going to be my barnacle sex? Because eventually I'm going to get tired of podcasting, and I'm going to want something new.
Well, I mean, if you're really going to make this lineup, you have to have some sort of really, really big, like earth-shattering, society-changing idea that you're halfway through and you're scared to put out, and barnacle sex is your distraction.
Dude, I could tell you guys that. I'd be like, I'm working on something.
You could.
Super deep. You'll never know.
It's a missile launcher.
All right, so
for elk hunting.
Hey. So thanks for closing that out, Phil.
Listen, I'm not gonna lie. Just to let the audience know, this is the first recording we're doing with all this new equipment, all this new stuff. I've been kind of drifting in and out, listening to the room tone, listening to see how much of the air conditioning we can hear. I was going in and out on whales, and then you said, "Hey, Phil, close it out, bud." And I floundered a little bit. I just want to listen. I told you right up front, it was a huge mistake letting me talk into this microphone.
No, I feel regret. I thought you'd have some really deep. I thought you might be the closer, like for every segment.
No, I'm no Roger Clemens. He was a closer?
No.
Boy, Phil.
Nope.
You're going down in flames, buddy.
So I think you got to stick to Game of Thrones.
You're going down in flames. You're no Jon Snow. You're no Melisandre.
There you go.
That's probably better.
I understand that.
Do you understand those references?
I have
Thank you,
no
sir.
idea.
So anyway, write in at thc@themeateater.com for any comments about Phil.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we just want to make sure you guys like him before we bring him back on.
Yeah. Vote up or down on Phil.
You've already voted up and down on me a lot. We're going to turn it.
Expand it out to Phil.
Expand it to Phil. Father's Day just happened. Before we get to our interview, we're going to talk a little bit about Father's Day. This might bring Phil back to maybe his wheelhouse. We don't know.
I am a father.
All right, perfect. And everyone has a father, so that helps. Hold on, I lost my email. Hold on, everybody. Son of a bitch, you're blowing it. They're all judging. There it is. Okay. And this has to be like a hard name to pronounce. Try this one, Miles, in your radio voice.
Elias Torheiden.
Let's give that again. I like that.
Elias Torheiden.
Oh, yes, Elias. Okay, Elias wrote in and he said some things about the last podcast, 2 podcasts ago now, we talked about Father's Day. And I gave a little speech on what my dad means to me. And Elias wrote in, he said, on your last podcast, you said to reach out and thank the people who took/take you hunting. And that was kind of in my monologue. I really just wanted to thank my dad on the air, but also have everybody reach out to the person that really is the reason that you're where you are in the hunting world. And he says, well, for me, that's you and Mr. Ranella more than anyone else the last 2 years. I'm a brutal adult onset rookie hunter. And if it wasn't for you guys, most of my experiences hunting would be from a truck, like the few people I know who do hunt. Instead, I'm trying to teach myself to still hunt and spot and stalk bear and deer. And though it's going slow, I'm still doing it. So I'm reaching out. Thanks.
Good on you, Elias.
Good on you, man.
Yeah.
That's not a humble brag on my part.
Until you called it out as such.
Until I called it out as such. But it is, when I say, like, when you say to reach out to somebody who took you hunting, there's a lot of people like Elias out there that just want somebody to help them out. And it's pretty damn important.
I mean, I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about the folks who have taken us hunting or fishing or learning how to navigate in the woods or whatever it is that are very difficult to be self-taught and really almost impossible to learn from a book. I'm not going to say it's impossible. You can learn these things from a book, but not without a lot of extra effort.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we always think about the flip side of that, which is who am I going to impart that to other than our own children?
Yeah.
And I think we all have people who would really appreciate getting the opportunity. Even, I'm going to call you out specifically on this, Elias, since you're talking to us. You may not think you have a ton of knowledge at this point, but I'm willing to bet there's somebody in your life who knows less than you do and would benefit greatly from going out in the field with you and learning what knowledge you've gathered in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And that's something that I myself don't do enough of. And I talk about it a lot. I think about it a lot, but I need to get better at executing that.
Yeah. And I've got a bunch of other emails here of people imparting, like, this is my story. This is how I came into this. And there's a reason why we all like to share our stories, our origin stories with.
Because we're narcissists?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Just
it.
checking.
That's why I shared that email, so you guys could be like, see how impactful this is. Keep listening. Okay, Phil, give us something.
It's weird working at this company because, I told Giannis and Steve straight up, I didn't grow up with hunting. My dad didn't hunt. My grandparents didn't hunt. No one in my family hunts. I'm mostly here because I know how to twiddle knobs and make Miles sound just a little bit more velvet.
But do you fish, Phil?
I have fished.
You have.
That is not
fished.
the same thing as do I fish. Yeah, no, I've never. I've been living in Montana for 11 years. I've never fly fished. I've got fly fishing friends. Most fishing I've done is off on a lakeside in Washington State. And,
so let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see Miles and I as mentors already? Are you looking up to us?
Yeah, is it obvious? Am I embarrassing myself?
In your eyes, yeah. You're starting to already look up to us.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Just after one recording.
It's just because I'm tall, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how that works.
Well, just as a mentor, you're welcome. I'll take you to go hunting.
That's how the podcast ends, is it's sort of like want to have a catch, Dad.
Yeah.
And to feel the dreams or whatever. You're gonna,
yes!
They'll be like, hey,
Yeah, that's hilarious.
You want to have a hunt?
All right, we're getting into the interview portion. We'll let Phil go out on a high note like George Costanza. Here we are. We're going to transport ourselves in time to the home of Doug Bock Clark to learn more about the Lamalerans. Enjoy. Doug, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for having me into your home here.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's not your usual hunting grounds, but thanks for making it out here.
Yeah, and I don't think this will be our normal hunting conversation. We were just, before I hit record, talking about kind of how to frame up the story of your book, The Last Whalers, the story of what you went through, the story of the people that you were around. With my audience, the modern hunting audience, and how to kind of relate those two things. I think that'll be our biggest challenge with the time that we have to do that. So let's quickly get into who you are, and then just, I think the pace of this will be as fast as we can get it, just to get all this information in perspective in the time that we have. So you're a writer and a journalist. You've written for many publications: New York Times, GQ, Wired, Rolling Stone, Men's Journal, Esquire. You have a lot of honors in the journalism space. Just talk about your career and kind of your philosophy on writing and journalism.
Yeah, so I'm a freelance journalist and write primarily magazine features, which are the longer articles that go in the center of the magazines, and do a lot of investigative work, especially in Asia. But recently I published my first book, which is called The Last Whalers. And it's the story of a hunter-gatherer tribe in Indonesia that survives by hunting 60-foot-long sperm whales with bamboo harpoons. And they're generally considered the last true big game hunters left in the world who truly survive by doing this.
Yeah, I think the Lamalerans are one of the more interesting people, and like your interaction with them is one of the more interesting interactions in the book. I just went through read the whole book and then listened to the audiobook on my travels here recently, and I just was enthralled by the story of the people. You know, you did a great job of coloring the people you met and their stories and kind of the trials and tribulations that they went through. Everything from being sucked under into the ocean by, like you said, a 4-ton sperm whale, or like the
probably
40-ton sperm whale. That's the largest predator, largest carnivore on the earth, with a bamboo spear. Like that life and death story, but also the grander story of modernity and subsistence hunters and how those things clash together. And so just start with how you first learned of these peoples and how you came to want to know more about them.
So I was living in Indonesia shortly after graduating from college. And I was living on a fairly remote island. Not truly out there, but, very far off the beaten path. And while I was there, I heard these stories about a group that whaled for their living. And they didn't whale in an industrial way. They still practiced the old ways. And at first I didn't believe this. The people who were telling me this had a habit of pulling my leg. They would tell me things like dinosaurs lived up in the jungles and stuff. But when I finally got an internet connection, I looked this up and I found out, holy shit, this actually does exist. So during that time, I went and spent a few weeks with them. And at that point, I wasn't looking to write anything about them. I was on a governmental fellowship from the U.S. State Department. But I was just curious to really see if this existed. And when, after several years, I became a journalist, I started writing for a lot of publications. And when it became clear that I had the capacity to do a book, I knew that this was a story that was grand enough and important enough that I would want to spend several years of my life working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what were I think I could answer the main reasons for that, but when you really looked at who they were and what they were in their culture, what were the things that kind of drove you to spend this much time with them and thinking about them?
So on that first island, one of the things that I had noticed was I had come in contact with a lot of traditional cultures, a lot of tribes that still survived as, in a mixed sort of foraging/agricultural tradition. They didn't do things as spectacular as hunt sperm whales with bamboo harpoons, but they might hunt sharks or other things, or they would hunt the animals that were up in the jungle. And I also became aware of how fast these cultures were vanishing. I could see it almost as a month-by-month thing as this road got constructed into the jungle, and as these groups encountered things, as they got better electricity and TVs, and their youth became more interested in what was going on in Jakarta and what was going on in Hollywood, than continuing the ways of their ancestors. And so as I sort of traveled both the Indonesian archipelago and the whole world, I saw that this was a worldwide story about the change of how humans survived. Once we were all hunter-gatherers, once we all hunted for our survival. And yet, at this point, almost none of those groups are left, and they will probably all be wiped out within the next, generation or so.
Yeah, and I've always, when people ask me, like, what would be the goal of what is one of the goals of your hunting existence, and like, what's the one thing you'd like to achieve? And I often talk about that point, is I would like to understand the mindset of someone who lives in a subsistence mindset, like that doesn't have the modern luxuries of thought that I do. Don't think about the modern push and pulls between wildlife and humans. It literally is. And for the Lamalerans, it's their culture, it's their religion. I mean, we can get into this, but they think that the ships have souls and the ropes have souls, and like they're so intertwined with the place and the animal and what it provides for them that it's a mindset that I've often, and your book does a great job of bringing folks into this, I've often yearned to know more about and learn more about.
Yeah. Well, I think from your perspective as a hunter, I think it might be interesting to you and to your listeners, because literally the whole culture is built around hunting. It's literally, there's no other way to survive. They live on a very sort of geographically unique peninsula on a very dry island. So almost no streams or other perennial water sources are available to them. They can't really grow anything. But what is unique about this bit of land is that it sticks out into a deep water strait that channels migrations marine life between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So a huge amount of whales, sharks, marlin, other large marine species all pass through there. And they can just see this from the cliffs that they live on.
Yeah.
And so what they do to survive is just row out in these ancient boats every day and try and spear whatever happens to come to them.
Yeah. And it's like I said, that their culture is that's their life. That's the animals are a part of them. They worship them and they live with them every day and they consume their flesh. And I think what makes this compelling is that it's, man versus beast when it gets down to the actual storytelling. But in a greater sense, you write a lot of things, namely that anthropologists that have studied the Lamalerans would say that they're the most cooperative and generous people that they've studied, and that has to do with hunting, because they have to cooperate to take down these giant animals, and then they have to be generous in the way that they share them with the rest of, I believe, 1,500 people generally in the community. So talk about what you saw, kind of what hunting had engendered in them.
Well, so that's a really good point. As we were sort of talking about before, the hunting has literally shaped the society. And so the Lamalerans are an extreme example of how hunting has shaped a society. But essentially, all hunter-gatherer groups are very collective. And that's because in the old days, to take down a large animal, you really couldn't do it by yourself. Maybe you'd get lucky and, get a perfect shot with your bow, or maybe you'd land the perfect javelin throw. But in general, you needed several dozen men to take down a bison or to take down a whale or something like that. And, millennia of cooperation forged cultures that placed an emphasis on both coordination during the hunt, but especially also after the hunt. So Lamalara is about 1,500 people, as you mentioned. That's divided into about 20 different clans, and each one of those clans has a boat, and the men of that clan hunt with that boat. Now, they catch about 20 whales a year, but given random statistical chance, your boat might, for one of the 20 clans, might catch 2 whales this year and 0 whales next year, right? If you happen to hit the year where you catch 0 whales, you're in deep trouble, right? You're not going to have anything to eat. So the way that societies have evolved is to figure out a way to basically force people to share all the meat that they get. That way, it doesn't matter if Group A, Group B, Group C, Group D gets a whale. It's all evenly spread. And this creates an incredible amount of sharing in all parts of the society. And so when anthropologists come in and sort of try and measure this, they score very, very highly on these tests, whereas comparatively, Western groups, Western industrial societies like ours, we generally keep things for ourselves. They will generally give things away.
Yeah. And that's one of the points that you make early in the book that kind of strings along as the stories are told. The other thing that struck me about them, their culture, was how much they were really the core of it. I felt from reading the book was their connection to their ancient ancestors and not only their gods but the ancient hunters and the people that they felt they had to honor in ceremonial ways, and really just a lot of their actions were maintained by we have to make the ancestors happy. We don't want to be punished because we've not looked back in time and remembered what their teachings. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how the ancestral lineage is kind of passed along and how it maybe is the center point of how they remain subsistence hunters going forward?
Yeah. So the Lamalerans are not like several other indigenous tribes which reject the outside world. The Lamalerans are very aware of what's in the outside world. The part of the island they live on is very isolated. There's a number of about 5,000-foot mountains behind them, covered in jungle. Hard to get over them. But on the other side of the island, there are modern towns. The Lamalerans themselves have started to get electricity and all these other things. And it's a conscious choice by the community that they make every year, literally at a meeting where everyone sits down and decides, what are we going to allow into the community this year? That they're going to try and keep the ancient ways. And this is because they feel that this is the best way to live. There's spiritual reasons, as you note. They believe the whales are incarnations of their ancestors and are sent to them as gifts, and that if they were to break with the ancient traditions, they wouldn't get the whales and they would starve. But they also believe that not everything that is happening in the outside world is great for human happiness. And this is something that a lot of anthropologists have also observed. Hunter-gathering groups were called the original affluent society by many anthropologists. That's a little bit of a misnomer. Life is not perfect there by any means, but there are certain advantages. Most hunter-gatherer groups, including the Lamalerans, probably work about 20 hours a week. They have higher child mortality rates, but if you manage to get into sort of the prime of your life, you're probably significantly healthier then. And they actually report higher levels of happiness than many people in industrial societies. So while it's important not to romanticize them, and there are severe disadvantages to living without certain modern technologies that the Lamalerans would love to have, there are also advantages that they see, and they want to keep those.
Yeah, I mean, and then like you said, you say in the book that they've remained true to their legacy and their culture by limiting foreign influence, and worshiping their ancestors, and making sure that those things remain center. And I thought that the choices that they make to live the way they do, because these whalers, I don't know, was there roughly 300 or so hunters in the community? I mean, they die.
Yeah, people get hurt and injured.
They're doing a very dangerous task, and so how do they weigh those things? I mean, as you said, there's good and bad with them, but from living with them, do they struggle with that every day? Like, we could go get cell phone. Well, they do. Some of them have cell phones, you said, but they have to weigh that every day.
They're very aware of it. And one of the main people that I follow in the book is a young man named John, who's an apprentice whaler. And he both wants to become a true harpooner, but that means, committing himself forever, essentially, to this way of life. But he's also interested in, what would life be like if you moved to the capital, which is a very modern city. He has the correct sense that life might be easier in some ways. Yeah. And so learning to negotiate that and balance that is something that he and the Lamalerans will be constantly doing. And I think it's not that different than you in choosing to hunt, which is, something that our society increasingly is moving away from. Yeah. But you draw a lot of value from that. In some ways, I don't know you too well personally, but, you may, too, be drawing value from the same things that the Lamalerans are.
Yeah. No, and before we hit record, I wanted to at least articulate that as best I could. And in reading this, you find yourself so far away from their actual life, but the struggle that they're going through, like, at least philosophically, I can understand, because they are pulled to. It is easy for me to go to the grocery store and get a turkey, or go to fast food and get a turkey sandwich. It's way harder, but also more enriching to go and kill a wild turkey in the woods and then feed it to my family. So I have this, even though mine is much light on its loafers than the Lamalerans, it's there. It kind of, in a smaller, more first world sense, but it is there, and I'm sure it's there for them as well. When you look back on your time, you say you first went there in 2011? Is that correct? Yeah. And over like 7 trips? What was it?
Probably. So first went there in 2011, and then when I got the assignment to do the book was in 2014, and over sort of the next 3 years, I spent about 4 months a year there. Oh, wow. And I've visited since, but the timeline that the book covers is really 2014 through 2016.
Yeah, and I mean, you live with them, you traded in their markets, you hunted with them, spearfished with them, you said you ate manta brains.
Oh, you do everything.
You got to do it all. Yeah. I appreciate the immersion. talk about that, like just your personal experience with it. I guess that informs the rest of this conversation. Like, how was it on a day-to-day basis? Did you feel comfortable there? Did you feel a challenge? I mean, you learned their language, which I think is astonishing. But talk about that day-to-day life while you spent time there.
Well, I felt incredibly lucky. They were extremely generous. I slept in the home of one of the leaders of the tribe, and everyone was incredibly welcoming. And it was they deserve so much credit for being participants in the book and for helping me tell the story in the right way. I had already had at that point, by the time that I landed there, I already had maybe 2 years of experience living in Indonesia.
Yeah.
I spoke the national language fluently. I grew up doing a lot of backpacking and and living in rougher conditions, and so it was not. It was a pleasure to get to go with them and just to be able to do everything with them, whether it was from going on dozens of whale hunts to helping them build boats. There, as much as possible, I tried to adapt myself. I wasn't always 100% able to. I'm definitely grew up in the mountains, and I definitely got seasick much easier than they did, which is something that they thought was hilarious.
They had a word for it, didn't they?
Oh yeah, there was a feeding the fishes. They got this idea that one time after I threw up, a bunch of whales appeared soon after. So the joke became, why don't you bait the fishes, Doug, and they'll see if we can get some prey. Yeah.
What was it like being around these? I mean, these are relatively small boats, much smaller than the animals that were swimming beneath them that they were trying to kill. I imagine. What was the name when you became a leader on one of the boats? Because I know each tribe has a boat, but there was like a
lamafa.
Lamafa.
I was never a lamafa, but stay very far away. I was purely an observer. I was not holding any harpoons.
Yeah, but to become a lamafa was to be like held up in the tribe, and then you see that a lot of Native American lore and some different things throughout hunting history that happened. When you're out doing that, I mean, and you tell the story of a lot of these guys. They see a whale from the cliffs. They kiss their wife and hug their baby and run out to go, to a very dangerous hunt. How did you see, just from person to person, that affecting these Lamafa, the people that were leaders and who had literally like the weight of the world on their backs? Because if they don't kill a whale, nobody eats. If they die, their whole family is kind of scattered to the community. So talk about that little piece of what you saw.
It's a huge responsibility, as you note, and it really weighs on them. Sometimes things would go wrong without it being really their fault. They might land a great hit and it might embed, and then the whale would use its tail to snap the rope. Mm-hmm. And there's not much they could do about it. But because of the Lamalerans' belief system, in which the outcome of the hunt is basically determined by the ancestors whom they worship, that might be a sign that the Lamafa had committed some sort of spiritual infraction. So I really, really admired the Lamafa. Not only did they have to do this incredibly difficult and skillful and dangerous physical task, but they really were also looked at as moral leaders of the community and really had to try and set an example for how they acted, and so that their crews could follow that and that everyone could be worthy of actually getting the whales.
Yeah, and that's in other cultures and other hunting cultures, we see that. I had a gentleman on our podcast named Dushan Smetana, and he is originally from Czechoslovakia, and he talks about this idea of the hunters having to choose, right? You have to be the most intelligent, the most thoughtful, because you have to choose which animal dies and which lives. You have to choose what's safe and what's dangerous, and you have to bring then that stuff back to your family. And you see that in this. I mean, you see that these guys are going to do a very dangerous thing, sometimes over very long periods of time. One of the first stories of the books, some of the characters go out, they're hunting whales, they get separated, and I don't know, I'm sure if it's what story I'm I'm thinking of, but they get picked up by, they have to get separated, and one of them gets picked up by a tourist ship and returned, and the others come back. And it's one of the first times, that you talk about the boats have souls. They would rather die than see these boats sink. And the ropes have some role to play in the ceremonial sense and the religious sense. It's very interesting, that connection. How did you come to learn about it? Because especially with the language barrier, how they see like the function of these things in the hunt.
Well, they're very open about it. This is something that they would discuss directly. And one of the real joys of getting to be there was I already spoke fluently Bahasa Indonesia, which is the national language. Everyone learns it, so that way all the groups of, all the thousands of different islands can communicate. But I also tried to teach myself the language that's just in Lamalara, this sort of tiny language. And that had so many very specific spiritual words and so many things that really weren't able to be described in anything but their language. And the amount of nuance that you can capture in a language that's specifically built for something like describing the spirituality of the hunt, or even just the hunt itself, is much, much more nuanced than we can in another language. So, for example, the saying is that the Inuit have, 50 words for snow, or whatever it is. They have dozens of different words for harpooning. They have specific words for, strike to the left of the thing, or, they even have a word, or strike to the right, or, the harpoon went under, or the harpoon bounced off, or, they even have a word specifically for when you throw a harpoon and it goes right between the horns of a manta ray, just barely missing. So, I think that, they were just incredibly generous in terms of taking the time to try and teach me these things. They really wanted it to be known. They're very proud of their culture, as they should be, and its richness.
Yeah, and in fact, part of the reason they agreed to do the book is because they wanted people to know about their culture. Is that correct?
Yeah. So as the outside world has increasingly sort of encroached on their island, they have gotten the sense that, partially true, partially untrue perhaps, but they have gotten the sense that there are elements in the outside world that do not want them to continue hunting animals, that some of which are endangered. Sperm whales are not endangered. Their hunt probably, they take maybe 20 a year. Their hunt does not endanger the global population of several hundred thousands. Yeah. But they do hunt other animals such as manta rays, which are correctly considered endangered. And while, it would be hard for a group that small to damage, global populations. Conservationists have come after them for threatening local populations.
Yeah, and that includes like the Nature Conservancy and other groups have legislation currently going, or at some point they had legislation going?
There have been various attempts over the years to try and legislate it within the Indonesian government that the Lamalerans cannot do X or Y or Z.
And they're generally exempt from a lot of laws, just from a subsistence hunter, standpoint. Is that correct?
Right. So under the International Convention for the Regulation on Whaling, which Indonesia is not a signatory to, but if they were, the Lamalerans would probably have a special exemption allowing them to do what they do, because it truly is a subsistence. They get most of their calories from the hunt for the whole community. They do not hunt gratuitously. And they do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
They're not using Japanese harpoon bombs and stuff. Indonesian law is a very complex legal thing that we're probably better off not getting into.
There's some things that we can't cover.
A lot of countries like this have sort of two sets of laws which are contradictory. One of which is, that indigenous groups can continue subsistence activities, but also that they have modern conservation laws. And in Indonesia, the primacy, which one has primacy, has not been tested in court yet.
Gotcha. So yeah, it's interesting, and they are aware. I think that kind of leads me to their awareness of the struggle. And you note in the book that I think it's you say since like the 16th century European movement to take over and kind of similarly modernize, in that sense, other cultures. We've seen we've halved the number of cultures that we have in this world. We've seen this degradation of so especially these types of cultures, subsistence cultures, over the years, and that has changed who we are as humans. And really, what the Lamalerans can do is help us look back to what are we now, what were we, what are we becoming. That's a entangled ideological mess, but it's there, and you present it in the book. I think present it well.
Yeah. Well, so as you note, since the 16th century, really since European powers began expanding across the world, the actual literal number of cultures has just diminished by an incredible amount. So when, the Portuguese first started sailing out towards the Indian Ocean, about a third of the world at that point was still covered by hunter-gatherer groups. And those groups were not organized by kingdom or empire. Each one was its own unique band, probably with about 100 people or so, with a unique culture, a unique language, a unique way of surviving in relation to their environment. And as empires have grown, as colonial empires have turned into modern nation states, and an industrial way of life has spread across the world and now occupies the vast majority of it, the number of these hunter-gatherer groups has plummeted till they're almost gone. And literally the number of different ways to live, not just hunter-gatherer, but as swidden farmers or herders, or just sort of what anthropologists count, roughly as cultures, has diminished originally from about 100,000 to about 7,000, and we're expected to be, down to, 1,000 or so within 50 years. So really one thing that the book is about is, what does it mean for this great diminishment of the different ways to be human? What does it mean that we're losing all of these things? And I think, one of the unique things about the Lamalerans is they're aware of this predicament and they're actively working against it. Many groups do not have the resources or the ability to do what the Lamalerans have done. And so the Lamalerans are very actively trying to choose the good out of the modern world and sort of reject the bad. But it will be an ongoing struggle for as long as they continue to exist.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a very unique position to kind of be on, they're not the last group standing, but they're one of them, to be able to look into the modern world and the thing that has the potential to erase their way of life and see the positives of it. Of course, you say in the book, and I think this is all subsistence cultures, like generationally, the more the generations progress, the more there is more need to have a connection with that modern world. And that's like ultimately the thing that challenges these cultures the most, is that as these new generations come forward, they're stepping into a world where all they have to do is, go across over the mountains, 30 miles to the town, and they can live a very modern and comfortable life. And it's hard to choose otherwise.
Well, I think a lot of it for, both the youth of the Lamalerans and other groups like this is the challenge is coming to see the worth of their way of life. So I think that of the young men that I follow in the book and sort of follow their development over 3 years, most of them end up, deciding that there's really worthwhile things. And I think that that's a decision that we all make, as hunters, you all, are deciding to do a very much older and in some ways much more honorable and ancient way of getting your food as well. And it's seeing what's worthwhile in these perhaps less easy or less quick ways than just going to the grocery store, but that there's a huge amount of worth in these practices that really connect us both to the natural, to the environment, but also who humans have been for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, and I think you say it well in the book that while we see modernity as progress, folks like the Lamalerans they see it as kind of an erasing of who they are and what they do. And we always have viewed technology and modernity and the move to be more progressive as this thing we have to do. It's almost like some weird manifest destiny that we hold. Where, I think this book accurately shapes why that's not all good. And if we lose these cultures, we lost ourselves in a big time way. And I think, in the relatively short time we have to discuss the book, I think that's the thing that I'm most impacted by. The stories kind of get you there, and I think hopefully everybody goes and gets The Last Whalers and reads it. But that's what I came out of it with, and it may be like feeble to try to compare it to my current state, but because I drive a car and live in a nice house with air conditioning, things like that. But it certainly was impactful for me.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Well, thank you for the kind words. And to be honest, I don't think it's wrong to compare it to our lives here. I think one thing that the Lamalerans do in a very unique way is that they're conscious of that decision between, a hunter-gatherer way of life and an industrialized way of life. They know that this is a choice. Most of us in, American society don't think of it as a choice. And to be honest, none of us are going to truly go back to a hunter-gatherer way of life. No. But we can do little things if we so choose to do. And one of those is hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. Did any of this kind of change the way you look? What was your going into it? We talked about you grew up in the Intermountain West in Salt Lake City, and then, we'll not go through your whole upbringing, but how much did you think about hunting yourself before, and then after, how did you think of it? Was there, if you're not doing it, was there a better appreciation for it, or have you ever considered that in this journey for you? Because I know it's a long time.
I'm not a hunter to the extent that you guys are. Yeah. I have hunted.
Yeah.
But I think it made me much more greatly appreciate what a fundamental act hunting can be. I think that we as a society in America have lost what spiritual aspects there can be. We look at it is purely as exploitative in certain, not in all parts of America, but in many parts. And I think that, for both American hunters that I know and also for the Lamalerans, people truly draw a spiritual sustenance from it. Yeah. And I think that has been something that's
very profound. That's a very great way to put it. I think most of the modern hunters in the States and elsewhere I've traveled to that I talk to have trouble articulating that sustenance, like what it is that's feeding them. And I think by reading this book and learning about these people, maybe they'll find a little bit of that and be able to explain a little bit of why it is they feel so enriched by this activity and why it is that they want to. You'll find a lot of people in our modern hunting community that are evangelists for hunting. One, because it's like you've mentioned, it's kind of shrinking. The community of people who do it is shrinking. But two, because they feel so bettered by the activity that they feel the need to go and spread that idea to people. Did the Lamalerans ever feel that? Like, did it feel insular to them? Like they wanted just to remain with their communities? They never wanted to spread their livelihoods and lifestyle and culture to other people's. They just they wanted it to be theirs.
Yeah, I don't think that they've ever had the real idea of going and converting the next.
You need to be a whaler.
Yeah. Come on, you guys. What are you doing farming?
This corn sucks.
But going back to that thing you were saying about the spirituality, I think that for them, in sort of a broad and general sense, what hunting does is it gives them a very holistic view of the world. This is literally in their spiritual value that any small action by the Lamafa, if it's against the moral code of the ancestors, ripples out in a way that causes failure or causes bad things. And the actions of the hunter are connected to the coming of the whales, and the hunter's spirit is connected to the boat, which is connected to the whales. And the whales are connected to the spirit of the sun and the sea and everything else. And I think that, without trying to put any specific spiritual gloss on, what American hunters might be feeling is, but at least one thing that I have felt when I have hunted has just been the greater connection, whether it's through the deer or the duck or, whatever it is I've hunted, to that greater web of both, the natural world, but also, the spiritual world that enmeshes it. And I think that echoes across cultures and across peoples, no matter where it is in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I also think wanted to make sure we talked about how badass that the Lamalerans were. Because there's I think they're just like it is. I feel like as a journalist, you want to get into like the real stories, but if I was just a real sensationalist digital journalist, I'd be like, tribe of whalers pulls tiger sharks out of the water, beats them on the head with a club, or jumps on the back of a sperm whale and rides it down, stabbing it in its head with a bamboo spear. Just for those folks who just want to hear what that's like to see and be a part of, give a couple of stories that left you kind of taken aback when you first experienced some of the things that are fairly normal to their culture, but the Lamafa, these folks are badasses, man, for lack of a better term. It
really is impressive how, for lack of a better word, how soft or unskilled we've gotten. Even someone like you or me who spends a fair time out in the wilderness, who I think has fairly decent hand-eye coordination and so on and so forth. We're nothing compared to people who do it for a living, for real, who are physically active for their livelihood every second of every day. I remember going through the jungle with a young man, maybe 12 or 13, who was going to bring me to this spot, this sacred whale stone. And he kept picking up rocks and just throwing them into trees. At least that's how it appeared to me at first. And then I realized he was throwing them at birds. And I was like, there's no possible way he can hit it. But, I was sort of like humoring him. And then I sort of realized, no, he was getting extraordinarily close every time. And so the ability just by practicing it, whether you're a Lamaleran youth who just wants to eat a jungle bird or, American Indian youths who would shoot grasshoppers with bows and arrows as they're training. You do this for your livelihood and you become very good at it. And they're not adrenaline junkies. One other thing about a hunt is that this isn't something they're doing, once a month. And, they can, perhaps accept a little risk. They have to have this thing be safe enough to do every day. Yeah. So while it can look spectacular, they try to be very, very careful in terms of walking the line. So, while they'll do incredible things like, I saw them, as you mentioned, drag a mako shark into a boat while it was alive because it was damaging the boards on the bottom, and then, just cut its spinal cord. It's a carefully weighed action, and the men are, have coordinate and work together, and it's something that they've developed over, a lifetime.
Yeah, no, it's compelling to read, but you could feel it that this is not something. They're not doing this for adrenaline. They're not doing this to show off. I mean, once they've become a Lamafai, they've already been kind of exalted in the community, and that's how they've gotten there. But they've only gotten there by being safe, efficient, and able to do the job that they need to do. And so it's clear that's the activity. It's a more cogent activity than you would imagine it to be. That just seems insane, like to watch someone pull a mako shark into a relatively small boat. Small wooden craft.
Yeah, and I was on it.
I was like,
whoa, hey,
listen, guys, let's leave it in the water. That's fine. That's incredibly interesting. In regards to butchering these animals, that's something that was interesting to me, and is interesting to me. And when it comes to a sperm whale, how do they go about? Because I've been around folks in Africa who butcher an elephant, and the indigenous folks there will like walk right through the gut pile and take a rusty blade and chop I've seen videos and watched it in person. People just chopping up elephant parts and taking hunks. How does that happen in the Lamalerian culture?
I think that you get used to if you're hunt for a living, you get used to butchering.
Yeah.
So usually by the time they drag a whale back, it's usually late in the afternoon, and so they don't start until the next day. So the kids go out and play on it like a giant water slide or like, King of the Mountain. And then, when the tide does come up and they're able to sort of drag it in, as it floats on the tide up onto the beach. It is just a normal part of everyday life. It's usually about 2 days to really strip down a decent sized whale. And it's, hundreds of people, going at it with these very specialized flensing knives, which are very sharp and very long, so it can get through the foot thick blubber. And it is a bloody task, but it also it's one that has great meaning and joy for them. They look at it as the ancestors have given them this gift. It's a reward for following the ancestors' way, and the most important thing in some ways is that they're sharing it out. So, that ritual act of division we talked about before of, making sure that, basically everyone gets a piece, even if they're not sort of in the core group that actually stabbed it, is a time when those bonds get forged and, reified and, reinforced between these different groups.
No, that's really interesting to me. Do they use the blubber and they use the teeth? Do they
everything?
Everything is used.
Literally everything. They are probably one of the last groups in the world to still use whale oil. It can be used for cooking, for medicine, for lamps. They still keep whale oil lamps. And the main thing that happens with the meat is that they cut it into about 6-inch strips and dry it, and that becomes the currency for their part of the island. So over the centuries, they have developed a very unique set of relationships with the farming tribes that live further up the volcano and which do have access to water, and can grow crops, but don't really have access to protein. So basically, the way the exchange has always gone is the Lamalerans will get protein from the sea, whereas the farming tribes will get carbohydrates from the mountains. And they still have a barter market in which, one strip of jerky is worth a dozen bananas or a kilogram of rice. And that is, for the most part, how they get their food still.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think you tell of in the book of holding up those oil lamps, and that's what struck me. I think they've got to be using whale oil, and they've got to be just subsistence hunters traditionally throughout all cultures have used every part of the thing that they're killing. So that's interesting. What are they? I know that by the end of your journey with them, they were wearing like modern textiles and shirts and clothes. But what, the book opens up in the early 90s with a really wholly different tribe and community than it is today. What did they wear traditionally? How did they dress? How did they look? If you could describe that.
Yeah. So Lamalera has undergone a huge amount of change in the last generation. Really up until about 2000, things were going very similarly to how they'd basically always been going. Yeah. They were for the most part purposely rejecting outboard engines. They had a small generator for emergencies and to use a little bit of electricity, but basically weren't doing that. But since then, a small road has been built over the mountain, and the tribe has progressively loosened its restrictions. And so when we were sort of talking about before that choice of, how much of the outside world do you let in and how much of the ancient traditions you preserve, that's been a sliding choice that's happened, over the last, 19 years. And the perfect example of this would be the outboard engines. Yeah. They've known about them since the 1970s. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Project tried to give them these, incredibly expensive things that all the other tribes in the area wanted, and they rejected them because they felt it would be against the ancestors' wishes. But, eventually they needed one to move one of their priests up and down the coast, which at that point didn't have a road, so that this old guy could get from one village to the next and preach. And then, once they got one, they sort of realized, this is really good for certain things. When we need to go around the island rather than climbing up over these mountains and get someone to the hospital.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's have one or two of them in here.
Yeah, you tell a story like the rescue boats that would go out would have outboard engines. Yeah,
yeah, and then then that's okay. And then then some sort of clever their version of lawyers decide to it's not legal to hunt the whales with these outboard engines, but what if we hunt the shark over here? Yeah, and you push the boundaries, and okay, eventually it's all right. We can hunt these sharks, or we can hunt these small manta rays. But the whales are not going to be allowed. These motors can't be involved in hunting the whales at all. And then someone's like, oh, well, what if we make a special kind of boat and attach a separate kind of boat, not the whale hunting boat, but a separate kind of boat, and attach the little engine to it, and then attach a rope from the little boat to the big ancient whaling boat and use it just to drag them home. It takes, we're carrying, no one wants to row home 60 tons of meat. So you can, and then eventually that gets approved. So you can see how, they have every right to make whatever decisions they want about their future. But still to this point, they still draw a hard line. Only the ancient whaling boats are allowed to go after the sperm whales. The end of the hunt, that's always what it's going to be. And so, this is the negotiation of modernity, of trying to figure out what's good that you're going to pick up and what's not. And I think it's a sort of something that we're all doing in our own way.
Yeah, and it's what I've noticed. I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I've noticed recently that Disney really likes this idea. Like, there's a film called they love it for some reason. There's a film called Moana, where it's a young Hawaiian girl that's not supposed to go past the reef, and she has to go. Her father's like, "This island is what we need. Don't go past the reef." And she wants this to go exploring, and it really is analogous to what you're talking about. There's another movie called Coco, where the family is shoemakers and they don't play music, and this kid's trying to buck the tide of the traditional way that his family acts, and he wants to go play music in the square. So there's something in this idea, this through line in our lives, that there's this thing we must honor, but is the progressive nature of our own childish behaviors, but our own new generations that want to go and explore new ideas. And so I found that in this book as well. It's this is a real life version of, for whatever reason, Disney has taken that up, or Pixar, whoever's making these movies, has kind of picked up on that in several ways recently. So it's interesting, and you're 100% right about it.
Well, I think it's a very fundamental tension in the modern world. Technological change is happening much faster than ever before. Globalization is connecting the world and connecting these groups that were originally buffered by distance and geography. And so I think that dynamic between future and past is something that all of us are going to have to deal with more and more often. And I think it's also important. A lot of times people look at groups like the Lamalerans or other hunter-gatherer tribes as sort of frozen in the Stone Age or something, or as sort of throwbacks. And I don't think that that's true. They're just as contemporary cultures as we are human beings. They have just chosen, and most of them have just chosen in a conscious way to continue this way of living. It doesn't mean that it's any more primitive or any more backwards or any of these other adjectives that we apply to it. It's just as contemporaneous as ours, and we sort of their choices, their sort of dynamics, whether it's the Moana choice or the choice that some of these young hunters are making, is just as contemporary and modern as anything that we do here.
Yeah, and it as relevant. And there's I can't remember the name of the ceremony, but there's a ceremony they do every year to like list the lost whalers out. That's something that struck me. At the end of the book, you talk about a young man named Ben who died. He was drowned by he speared a manta and was pulled under the ocean and died. It is a pretty powerful way to kind of close out his story, and then talking about like he will be resurrected every year when for a while he'll be at the top of the list of all these whalers that have perished. I'm sure you attended those ceremonies. Like, what kind of take me through that and what that meant to the Lamalerans and their community, because it was interesting to me how the way that they did that specific ceremony.
Well, I think so. What you're talking about is Misa Arwa, which is sort of the mass for lost souls. And I think the one thing the Lamalerans do better than our society does is that they keep present in their minds and in the rituals and sort of daily actions of their community those who have been lost on, in the sort of the physical plane. And by doing so, those people truly remain part of the community for the living people. And that's not just an expression. They really do feel like they're interacting with them, that those spirits are joining them on the hunt and are giving them signs and portent. And, I think that that's one of the things that they don't want to lose. I think that that's one thing that's really worth keeping as well.
Yeah, sure. Did you find them to be a happy people? I know we can say that there might be generational angst, obviously, with the modernity part of it, but did you find them to be happy in their daily lives?
I think that's a complicated question because, we often talk about, I think it can be a way to it's sort of infantilize a culture almost. And I think that they're I think that they're just as happy and also unhappy as we are. They're human beings. I think that their society is structured in certain ways that bring out certain types of happiness better than ours does. None of them are basically ever lonely. And this is true across most hunter-gatherer groups because things are so collective and so communal. But at the same time, those can also, that sort of collectivism can also provide a break to, or, a slowdown to individual ambition. So at the same time as you might never be lonely, if you have to sort of share whatever resource you get, you can never really keep any for yourself so that you might be able to build up a stockpile of fish that you could then go to the town and sell to buy a net, which you could then catch more fish with and so on and so forth. And I've had young hunters express to me frustration about that.
Yeah, there's some socialism in that, huh? It's like the idea that if you're a really good hunter, it doesn't really matter because you're sharing it either way. You could be a so-so hunter or the best harpoonist on the boat, but either way, you must share it with everyone. It's a yin and yang of that idea, I'm sure. That's what I wondered about in reading the book. Like, I struggle with certain things in my life. You kind of have this, much of our modern society is detached from the family units that were so prevalent in this country in the turn of the century and on and on. I have moved away from our family units and done those types of things. And I think that's striking to me that, these folks live, that's really all they know, is that they live in this small community and the same people every day, and their families are there, their traditions are all insular. How did you feel going there? Were you jealous of any of their traditions? Did you wish that you could bring back some of these things to our world? Did you want to bring some of our ways of living to them? I mean, how much did you weigh those things?
I think as a journalist, my goal is to not, I'm an observer. I try not to affect events or to change things. So I very much didn't want to sort of bring anything in with me. It was a great joy to be able to become, true friends, and I still keep, in good touch with a lot of these people. And, I miss them. Yeah. Like it's something that I truly, there's nowhere else I can speak that language. And, sometimes I have dreams in that language still. And it's both a joyful and a lonely experience.
That's a great way to put it. Is there something, to wrap up here, is there something that, from this book that you would hope, we've talked about a lot of, I think, the through lines of the book and the very tentpole ideas of how you've built the story, but is there one boiler point that you'd want everyone to know that's a hunter now that's trying to relate to? Because often in the hunting community, we talk about our ancestors and the fact that we feel of that in our activity. Is there something that you would boil that all down to from what you've learned from all this time? I know that's a tough one, but
I think that one of the more important lessons that I drew from the Lamalerans is that, how much we live an industrial lifestyle is a choice. Like you can consciously choose how much you want to participate in that, whether it's going and being a true whaler for all of your calories, or just being a hunter and in an American sense and getting both the spiritual and physical sustenance from that.
Well, it's a great book. I enjoyed reading it. I'm sure I'll read it many more times. I found it, just from the way I think of the world, I found it profound in many, many ways. It's called The Last Whalers. Doug Bock Clark. Is there? I'm sure people can get it anywhere books are sold.
Anywhere books are sold.
Well, go get it. I am a big fan of the book, the conversation. Thank you very much for having me in your home and for the conversation. I'm going to probably listen to the audiobook on the way back on the plane because I feel like there's so much detail in there. I probably missed something. So thanks for the work. It's great.
It's been an honor. Thanks for the interview.
Thank you, Doug.
Oh, that's it. That's all. Another episode in the books. Thank you to Doug Bock Clark. Thank you to Miles Nolte. And thank you to Phil, the newest member of the Meat Eater family and of the Hunting Collective family. It's a good episode. Hopefully you guys found it. It's just a little bit of a different subject. We traveled all the way across the world to kind of discuss who we are and what hunting means to us and what it means to our humanity and all those things. So appreciate you kind of diving into those complicated topics. Tried to keep it as light as we could. Go pick up Doug's book, man. The Last Whalers is a great read. And if you don't like reading, pick up the audiobook. Either way. I got no stake in that game other than I really like his work. So go check that out. What else? Oh, thc@themeateater.com. thc@themeateater.com. Please continue to send me your emails and thoughts on the show, your audio clips. Again, 1 to 2 minute audio clip. Speak right into your phone. Review the show, ask a question, whatever you want to do, send me the file. Play them at the end of each show. As you'll hear in a minute, we actually have a comedian that sent us an audio file this time. His name is Tyler Sitar. He's a comedian, and he has a little bit about hunting. So why not play that at the end? The audio quality is iffy, but some of it's pretty funny. So give Tyler a play.
here in a minute. But before we go, I just wanted to mention, and nobody really asked me to do this, but I think it's really cool. My friends at Yeti opened up another, what they'll call flagship store, or the Yeti retail store in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a cool place. If you follow them on Instagram, you've been seeing all the musical performances, all the culinary events they've been having there. I just think it's cool that a brand like Yeti is reaching out and doing something in a town like Charleston. So if you're ever in Charleston, go over and visit the Yeti store. It looks like a pretty cool place. I've not been there, but I'm going to go. It's going to be badass. So that's really all I got for this week. Next week, we're going to be joined by Tyler Sharp. Tyler Sharp is the editor-in-chief of Modern Huntsman, so he's got a lot to say about the current state of hunting in our world. Some pretty interesting and perhaps inflammatory things. So we'll see how it goes. And we'll see you next week. I want to leave you with a little comedy and then a little old number 7. See ya.
I recently became addicted to hunting. I'm an adult onset hunter. Yeah, I didn't even tell you what yet. You're like, yeah, kill something! Yeah. No, it's white-tailed deer. I hunted, I didn't use a tree stand because I'm a coward. I'm not afraid of heights, but I'm afraid of falling, so I bow hunted from the ground, covered head to toe in camo. Why did my guidance counselor now tell me I have to be Rambo 4 months out of the year? I should be able to hunt him. Why does he not have any dreams? That was fantastic. It was awesome. If you don't think hunting is an addiction, you never spend 4 hours in a flea farm looking at arrow fletchings and smelling fox urine. The girlfriend doesn't have a relapse. She's like, you're out that flea farm again. Hunting is awesome. Somebody, every time I talk about hunting, people are like, oh, you shot a defenseless animal? Like, a deer is not defenseless. Would you feel safe with a deer on an airplane? No. Like, what, did he look at you funny? No, he looked at me delicious. Man, do you not like steaks? What is wrong with you? I'm Randall out there, and every fall is deer at dawn. Yeah, well, they're hunting VC. Venison containers. We used a weapon. That's not fair. Why don't you fight the deer barehanded? Like, that's not how things work, idiot. These are brains. Why don't you try raising your kid in a field? Let the Vikings chop their heads off. There's all kinds of technology. I have a smartphone with rare earth minerals to connect with a GPS satellite to bring my truck to the pharmacy so I can jogging stream. Yeah, he's hiding with a scratching. There's a whole problem. Jaundice is a fungal infection that is happening to a lot of men, and we're not talking about it. It's me and John Mack. That's it.
Jack Daniels, old number 7. Tennessee whiskey got me drinking in heaven, and angels start to look good to me. They're gonna have to deport me to the fiery deeps. Oh, to the fiery deeps. Drinking in the fiery deeps. Oh, to the fiery deeps. Drinking in heaven.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.